All right, welcome everyone to today's public forum, and we are very excited to have you join us for what promises to be an insightful and engaging session with our very special guest from the NSW government. But before we get started, just a few quick reminders to ensure a smooth experience for everyone in the session. Firstly, please make sure your microphones are muted during the presentation to minimize background noise. Should you have any questions or comments, we encourage you to use the chat feature or the raise hand button. And we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation and a demo where your questions will be addressed. So, without further ado, introducing our virtual host today, Link Digital's chairman and executive director, Steven De Costa. The virtual mic is yours, Steven.
Thank you, thank you. I always find it's like you're way too smooth with that, and then it gets to me, and I'm all jittery and normal. So I feel like I've been built up too much. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about Data4me. We'll get to that in just a sec with Tom. There are a few updates that are worth sort of going through before we lead into Tom's presentation, but I won't do all the updates now. The main one is just simply that the public forum next week or next month is going to be next week. It's going to be the first Thursday, and it won't be at 11. It'll be at 5:30 p.m. Why? Because it's Open Data Day with an S in bracket days next week from the 2nd to 8th of March. And there's a little thing that I'm trying to pull together for the CCAN community here in Australia, or CCAN orientated work that gets influenced by Australian folks worldwide. And that's to just kind of get a whole bunch of little demos of different things going on. And so the event next week on the 7th of March is going to be around just doing a best of or a showcase of that, or even just having people come together and discussing what they're doing with CCAN, what they like to do with CCAN, why it's relevant internationally, particularly because it is a digital public good. And the thematic sort of approach for Open Data Days this year is putting a spotlight on CCAN as a digital public good in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. But that's a really good crossover to Tom, who is working in the environmental sector. And Data4me is all about environmental data. Tom is with the most difficult acronym in government to work with at the moment, the DCCEEW. It's got the climate change, it's got the environment, it's got the energy, it's got the water, all wrapped up in a department. So things change all the time in government, but things that don't change so quickly is the environment. When it does change, it's pretty spooky stuff. We need to pay attention to it. So project initiatives, bringing people's interests together, studying it carefully and understanding exactly what's going on is super important. So I'm now building you up, Tom, into something.
Thanks,
how are you going to help us with the Data4me project?
Like all good government employees, we've shortened the acronym to DQ to make it easier to say. But yeah, so that'll happen at the beginning of the year, but I can go over that. I'll just share my screen. About the presentation. Oops, there we go. So my name is Tom Barrett, and I'm a senior scientist in the Science Economics Insights Division of the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water. And today I'm going to be talking about the Data4me tool designed to save time and increase the impact of our work in government. Just a quick overview. I'm just going to talk about where I work, where the idea came from, how Data4me is actually working, the workflow, quick demonstration, talk about some improvements, future challenges, some acknowledgements. First, I'd just like to acknowledge I'm recording this webinar on the lands of the Anouan in the New England tablelands of New England, New South Wales. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands in which you all work and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar. I pay my respects to the elders, past and present, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal people, their ongoing cultures and connections to the land and water. I'd also like to recognise the importance of Aboriginal cultural knowledge to land management and stewardship, and its contribution to help us address the many environmental issues we're currently facing. There's just some snaps of the New England tablelands area that we work in. Beautiful waterfalls and lots of plants and animals. So where do I work? It's this new department of climate change, energy and environment and water is under the Minister Penny Sharp, who's the Minister for Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Heritage, but also Rose Jackson, who's Minister for Water. And you might be familiar with some of these groups, National Parks and Wildlife, the Environmental Protection Authority, but we work in this branch called Biodiversity Conservation Science. And just to give you a bit of an overview of how we contribute, this is a bit of a program logic of the high level goal the department's working towards, which is ensuring sustainable New South Wales through climate change, energy action, water management, environment, and heritage conservation and protection. So, and that's through evidence-based, science and data-driven projects that result in positive real-world impacts. So there's a big focus on having an impact, making a change, and we do that through projects. So where did this idea come from? One of the drivers, obviously, is all of the New South Wales data legislation and policies that a lot of you are familiar with, like open data, the need for data sharing, etc. But really, for me, it was through my personal experience, and it's really a combination of 30 years of real frustration and anguish associated with trying to use data to undertake projects. And I've discovered that that is also shared by a lot of other data users. In talking to the other data users, we found the main pain points that we tried to address with Data4me included things like finding the right data that was fit for purpose. So this was really an issue for me once when I did a big catchment modeling project for natural resource management in the North Coast. And I discovered after doing quite a bit of work, someone informed me I'd used the wrong catchment layer because there's about 4 or 5 different catchment layers. So I had to go back and rerun all the modeling using the correct catchment layer. But that's just one of many examples where you really get in trouble if you don't find the right data that's fit for your purpose. The second was being able to share knowledge about that data. So if I can share that with others doing catchment management, they might not make that mistake and so not waste time and effort. Also managing data in projects. It's a real, I suppose it's often something that gets left to the end of a project. You'll see the last thing on the project plan is data management. It often is done hastily or drops off altogether. So one of the objectives of Data4me is trying to develop a tool that users can actually use to manage their data from the beginning and all the way through their project, so it's not a mad rush at the end. So we had the opportunity to put our idea up in this really innovative process called the Innovation Challenge. It was based on a structured innovation approach where they collected a whole bunch of ideas in this beginning phase called Funnel In. It's about 45 ideas were collected based on different challenges that were put up. And they used Microsoft software called Idea Note to collect those. And we put up the idea in one of the challenges called How Might We Transform Our Delivery so we can improve customer service and environmental outcomes. So about 5 of those ideas out of the 45 were chosen to be pitched to the executive. And so it was a bit like Shark Tank. We had to put up our idea and tell them why it was a good idea and should be funded. So this was the pitch. So that the current problem is we've got absolute huge and growing volume of data available in data portals at Commonwealth, international, in the Australian and state and local level. So a huge amount of data to choose from. And so that all that data is a bit like having it's just a registry of data, like the old yellow pages. We used to use the yellow pages to find services for people that were here before the internet, like lawn mowing or restaurants. So technology has really come a long way to help us to find those services. Things like Google, but also TripAdvisor. We can now go in and search for restaurants, and then we can browse how people have rated those restaurants just to find the one that's fit for our purpose. We might be vegan, so we might search for vegan restaurants and then see what people have experienced. And we use that information to make a decision about which restaurant to go to. So the idea and the pitch was we want a tool like this, except for data. So we were chosen to go into the next stage of the innovation challenge called the incubation. And this was run by consultants called ThinkPlace in Sydney, where we had a bunch of workshops where we developed a wireframe. We really developed the idea a lot more, wireframe mock-up. We ran that with users and got feedback. And that allowed us to go to the next stage, which was build a working prototype. And this is where Link Digital came into the picture. And they helped us build that working prototype, obviously based on CCAN and the architecture that's already commonly used for data management. The next step was deploying on our system, testing, using, maintaining, and supporting. That's ongoing, but the stage we're really focusing on now is the promote adoption and also organizational culture change. So getting people to use it essentially. So how does Data4me work? It's Data4me's online tool developed for government workers so you can register your projects, you can search for data, metadata, discover how others use that data, relate that data to your projects. You can then rate and provide feedback like TripAdvisor, and then generate reports or it's like a citation list that you can then cut and paste into your project report. So in a nutshell, it was really developed to join the dots between projects, documentation, people, themes, branches, internal, and then organizations, and metadata. So it's really a typical relational database of joining the dots and helping people come into, if they're looking for something, to come into any of those areas and be able to find the data they want. So from a software architecture point of view, it uses the Comprehensive Knowledge Archive Network, CCAN. I had to look that up. Open data management system. So it's a system that's already being used by our internal portal, the data registry portal, the information asset register, as well as the external government data portal, the sharing and enabling of environmental data, or SEED. So it harvests metadata from both those portals. It filters out replicates and then provides that essentially a database of all those records that in Data4me for the users to search. So it's like a one-stop shop for searching for your data. We're also working currently on adding more portals to search, such as Data New South Wales and data.gov, as well as our climate change portal. So this is the workflow, how we see it being used in everyday business as usual projects. The first step is you create your project. You can search for data on those two metadata registers, portals. You can also go and see comments from other people to help you make decisions about what data to use. You then relate that data to your project. This next step is to obviously download and or source that data and use the data, or you may decide that it's not fit for purpose and not use it. But that's useful information that then you can provide in feedback to the data, whether the data was fit for purpose, the pros and cons, etc. The next step at the end of your project, you can run a report which creates a list of citations. You can put in the references of your project report. And in an ideal world, you would also register the outputs of the project, if they're data, and they can then be re-related back to your project, which sort of completes the life cycle of your project. So you can see how you're managing your data as you go through your project. And I'll just give you a quick demonstration. So this is the Data4me tool. So at the beginning of a project, you might want to just search for other projects, and you can search for projects based on themes or groups. For example, say you're starting a project which is to do related to modeling vegetation or vegetation condition. You can go to the theme that's most relevant and see what projects are being undertaken in that theme. You can go into the project and read more about it. And also look and see who's running the project and send them an email if you want to find out more. You can then also see what data was used in that project. And these are links to the metadata of the data that was used or actually generated in the project. Or you might actually know of somebody working in that field. So for example, if I know for a fact that Megan McNally is a scientist working on modeling vegetation condition. So you can see that she's got a project there. You can also relate other documentation. So for example, she's related a scientific paper that she's published about modeling vegetation. So it's that linking, joining the dots. You can also search on organizations. So for example, I know that the local land services often work in vegetation, so I could search and see what projects they're working on. I can see that they've got a project there which is more to do with river rehabilitation, so not really vegetation condition, but these are all the different ways you can search. You can also search for keywords, so you might search for vegetation and you can see what projects have the word vegetation in them. But I'll quickly show you how we've tried to make it as easy as possible, as user-friendly as possible, to reduce any impediments to adoption. So one of the themes is that the look and feel is exactly the same as our existing internal data portal. So that helps, but this is just showing you how quickly you can register a project. You just give it a title. And it will create a URL. So now you've got a link for your project and then a short description. And also assign tags. So if you want to, you can use the standard ANSLIC tags. And there's a link to a list of all of what those are if you don't know them up front. or you can do your own tags. You can assign the share status. So if you want to set it as private, only you can see it and the administrator. So you can work on it maybe as a draft. You can make it available to your organization or the public. So the public is essentially everybody on the network that can see the portal. So you can add resources here as well, such as the links to scientific papers or PDFs. But I'll just come back and do that later. So now I've registered my project, that's it. The next step is to add relate data. And so you can search the data portals. At the moment, there's the two. So land use is a common data set. So I've just put the word land use in there as a keyword search, and it's come up with a whole bunch of different land use data sets. And you can see here that some of them have got a score rating, and that indicates that Data4me users have left feedback. So I can see that this one's been given a 3. There's another 2017, which is given a 4.5. So I can go in and look at that. And this is essentially a copy of the data from our information asset register, the IAR. You can read about the data and download the data, but also you can look at the ratings and feedback from others. So you can see that this is actually one I've used in a modeling project, but also a colleague used it for ecological modeling, which is what I'm also doing. So he's given it a good score. There's a minimum amount of feedback, which is just how it was used, the overall score, but you can also go into more detail about spatial accuracy, attribute accuracy, etc. So I might decide that I want to use that one in my project, so I can then go and I can add that to my project. And so now I've added that to my project. Go back to my project, and then I can leave feedback on how I use that data in my project. But also run a report at the end of the project that lists all of the citations of which you can copy and paste into your report, project report. So it's just a really rapid demonstration. I just want to talk about some in proposed improvements. So some of them are being actually implemented now, and some of them are for future. So we're going to be adding more portals for the data harvesting. So it'll allow users to search the Data New South Wales portal, as well as data.gov, and also the New South Wales Climate Data Portal, which is currently in beta version, but will be going into production later this year. We're also adding new features to promote user use and feedback, which is always a challenge, improving usability. But I think that a really big one that I'd be interested in people's thoughts is the potential to use AI to really help users search and to really tailor the results to their needs. There's a huge potential there. In terms of challenges, one of the really big ones, I think, we've really focused on the technical development of the tool, but we've really entered a phase now of promoting the tool and really bringing about cultural change in government, so that this tool is just considered just like Microsoft Word or Excel or project management tools. It's just another tool that you use when you start a project. Motivating users to leave feedback is always a challenge. Everyone said that text saying, thanks to your service, please leave feedback. And you go, oh, don't have time to do that. So, how do we develop a culture of sharing information about data? How do we monitor and evaluate the tool, whether it's meeting these benefits that we put up right at the beginning in the pitch? That's always a challenge too. And we're building that into some of the reporting to monitor the sort of level of adoption of the tool. Obviously, resourcing for future development and support is potentially a challenge with changes in government. So just like to do some quick acknowledgements. Acknowledge Link Digital for giving me this opportunity to present Data4me. It's really exciting to see your idea come to life like this. We've got a lot of people behind the scenes who have been working on Data4me, our sponsor, to Georgina Kelly, managers. Innovation Challenge was first put up by our Deputy Secretary, Dean Knudsen. Loretta O'Reilly project managed for quite a while. And Alex and the team in Link Digital have been fantastic to work with. It's been great. Nothing's doing too much of trouble. I bug them all the time. They must get sick of me. They had a design sprint team with the Think Place consultants, and there's been a lot of testers and experts and other contributors and reviewers. So it has been a real team effort. Yeah, so that concludes the talk. Thank you very much for your time. And I suppose we can go to some questions. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I can see that stuff in the chat. I have a couple of quick responses though, right at the start. You talked about the problem of all this data. I just flip that around and say it's the opportunity of all this data. Like definitely there are problems with what data can we use, where do we get it from, but having lots of data portals, lots of data accessible to folks who might be working on projects, research, it's absolutely an opportunity as much as it might be a problem and when you're facing the choices to be made. But I love the framing of the services and the purpose because the idea that you can match around purpose does require that someone first sets out some measure of what purpose might look like. So the concept of a project upon which data can be used to create direction towards a purpose. That's the kind of ephemeral thing that could be missing. And again, just a little bit of framing that I got from the whole sort of workflow there is that the social value or the social proof of value is super important when you want to motivate people or you want to help them through and guide them that this isn't the first time people have done this before. You're not alone in the dark. So the concepts of projects are really helpful there. So the social proof, but also the social value of reaching out to people. I've seen that over the years with lots of different projects like this. There are many things in organizations and government that grow and flourish for a time that then potentially become dead ends or dead branches. So projects can help, even if it sounds like they wouldn't, to identify things that are a bit discontinued. Because if the social value is missing or the social proof is no longer there, it becomes a reference. And that can save a lot of time if people are just looking at the data artifacts and saying, well, here's this data set, but effectively they have no context to that. They're not quite sure whether they should be pursuing that as a currently updated, current state of the art, current best practice set of data that's coming from active programs. So I think all of these things are super important. But before we get to the other questions, there is also my burning question would be, to what extent are you worried about the ephemeral nature of projects? So there is a challenge with managing projects and sort of attaching them. They do die. Some are more important, they get more activity. Some are less important, they get less activity. People manage projects in lots of different ways. It's a very messy sort of space. conceptually. I know that, you know, it's great. I'm thinking of, so kind of mixing metaphors. There's basically, if you whisk the milk, you'll get the cream. If you churn the cream, you'll get the butter, right? All of that work that a project team does is to create an output, like an output they all believe in, and they think that when we do this work together, we'll get this great output and be very valuable. This project seems like, well, not all milk is the same, because we need to know the right data to create the right outcomes, and we need to coalesce around that. But yeah, it's just, do you have a sense of that future, of that the projects being live and living and ongoing within the kind of user group that this is planned for?
Yeah, well, there's really two modes of use, I suppose, that I see. One is using it from the beginning of the project, so it helps you find the data. The other is, you know, maybe just using at the end of the project just to register what data sets we used. And I actually purposely haven't really nailed down the definition of a project, because, you know, there's already a very strict definition of a project in our financial system. You know, it's a project with a source of funding, and it has a you know, there's a whole project management system around it. But then from my experience, there's a lot of other projects that don't fall into that category, which are just potentially just as important, you know, and they may be just an initiative of a staff member or something that's been requested from another customer to say, okay, wouldn't it be great, you know, if we could map, you know, all of the feral deers in this national park. You know, it's like a need-driven sort of meeting customers' need, but it doesn't necessarily have a, you know, a funding bucket and a whole project management system. So, and I think it's just as important to know what data was used for those. And maybe you'd call them activities, maybe they're not at the level of a project, but I think for me, it's really important to capture all of those sort of activities, as well as the big mega projects, you know, that have teams, because, you know, it really helps reduce that reinventing of the wheel. So, you know, what if you do develop that you know, that project, that data set for you know, managing feral deers, but then someone in this, maybe that's on the north coast, and then on the south coast, somebody's got the same problem, and then they've asked somebody else to develop a data set for feral deers. You know, it's like it really, the idea is really just sharing as much knowledge about how data is used, what are the problems that we're trying to address, without really being too prescriptive about it.
Well,
Yeah.
I liked in your presentation aligning around purpose, because that to me makes a lot of sense. The projects emerge because everyone agrees they'll come together around the purpose of the intended outcome.
That's right. Yeah. And so I suppose I mean, really driven by selfish reasons, that this is a tool that I've wanted for ages, because I'll sometimes find out that somebody's done something very similar, but it's after I've finished and it's too late. You know, it's like if only we could share all of that knowledge. And I suppose there's an element of crowdsourcing, you know, that this relies on. And so that's the really important and the critical factor is that we need that crowdsourcing of sharing of knowledge, so that it gets to a critical mass where people find it useful and will use it. So that's something I'd be really interested if anyone's had any experience in that sort of crowdsourcing of knowledge sharing.
That's definitely a good question for folks, because I know there's people from the Canadian Open Data Society here. In fact, Lee has got a question just asking about the feedback. What's the feedback from users been so far?
Their feedback's been very positive. It's been, everyone says that it's really fantastic and it's a great thing, but I think part of the problem, it hasn't reached that critical mass of a lot of projects in there. So we only really launched it in December last year, and then everyone went on holidays. And so there's been a bit of a hiatus there. But I think, and we're really, the other thing that we're doing is that we're working on how it integrates into the whole data management ecosystem in our organization. Because there's, yeah, I suppose that there's a fair bit of work to do there. There's all these different systems, you've got the data portals, you've got Data4me, and you've got other communities of practice. You've got other features of sharing information. So how do we bring that all in? And so I've got a team working with me now to help promote Data4me and integrate it into that ecosystem. And we're really going to focus on a sort of a bottom up as well as a top down approach. So I'm sort of the more bottom up because I'm the sort of technical person that works with all the other nerdy GIS people. But the top down is really how do we get it into our organizational procedures? Yeah.
Yeah, got it. I mean, well, I think we've all experienced those sorts of online reference platforms like TripAdvisor that you've mentioned, where there's a thinly traded market of feedback. When there's not a lot of engagement around services or concepts, it's very difficult to then value the collection of those concepts in a town or a place or a domain. So yeah, absolutely. You got to get people churning the butter.
Yeah, exactly.
Creating the work that creates the value that demonstrates why everyone wants to work together and coalesce around these sort of concepts. One other question. So Joe Miller has a question. When you selected organization or public, did you say that the limitation there is their access to the source records, i.e., let's see those.
So sorry, I might have glossed over that a bit quickly, but essentially that's assigning the level of share status. So who can see your project? So if it's private, only you can see it. If you select organization, your organization can see it, which is in our DQ is at a branch level. But there's other organizations in there like Local Land Service, DPI, EPA, Royal Botanic Gardens. So that limits who can see the project. And not the data, just who can see the project. Yeah.
Yeah, so I do know from having a quick chat to Lex about this, the kind of way in which projects are created in CCAN for those following along and wanting to know. It's basically a package type, which is what data sets are as well. So by setting it up as a package type, it means you can use some of the things that we commonly use for data sets, like related data sets. So when you see a project and related data sets, it's basically package type project related to data sets, which are a different package type. But yeah, in CCAN, the plugin is just related data sets. It's cool. Lee, you got your hand up.
Okay, I think I'm going to jump the line. I apologize to anyone who I jumped. First, Tom, I got to say, I think you're really wise to be careful with the project definition. Otherwise, you're going to have the PMI Institute coming right after you. So that's good. So one thing I'm thinking, this wasn't the use case you mentioned, but so I'm a professor over in Canada, and I'm getting a lot of students to try and get them to get accustomed to open data. It's really difficult. But what's really jumping out of this project part is almost you could have a section with like project shells for people, and you could show this is how you could do something, right? There's a lot of potential, I think, for like almost like an open project area. It just sort of hit my brain. It's not fleshed out, but I'm actually really excited by this. I think your website in general, I think there's a lot of potential here to get people interested, I think. Because the project angle would get another group of people that maybe aren't that interested in looking at open data. Because you could show like, here's how you do a project, here's some data sets that are similar to it. What do you have in your own area?
Yeah, that's right. So I suppose what it means is that when you start a project, you're potentially not starting from scratch. You can see what others have done. You can see the actual data they've used. But I think the other potential benefit is another challenge we have is actually getting scientists to actually register their data. It's like that data management thing. It often drops off. The objective is to publish the paper, so that's tick the box. Managing the data is often quite onerous, and so this provides an incentive, to publish that data, because you can relate it back to your project, and it completes that life cycle of your project.
Thank you, Tom.
Claire's got a question. She just asked if she might have missed this. She was generally saying amazing, awesome, good job with project definition, but can users add visualizations to their project as well, like results of their using the data? And what is the platform architecture? Is it on its own server?
So yeah, Link Digital, you guys host it for us. I think it's on Amazon.
Yeah, it'll be AWS.
Yeah,
I'm imagining it's
yeah.
part of the stack. Probably Yaroslav.
Yeah, it's AWS. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I suppose that visualization is that's really interesting sort of extra functionality to think about. But one of the things we use a lot in our organization is Power BI to visualize data. So, and dashboards are becoming very popular. So that's potentially, yeah, some sort of another sort of angle to think of how those sort of visualizations can be integrated. Does that answer the question? I'm not sure if I've answered it.
Yeah, you did. Thank you. I'm Claire, by the way. And to your comment, Lee, because I manage a research data portal, which we share science research through. So we set up with Link Digital our CCAN site in the sense that we manage major projects, and under them are sub-projects. So kind of set up the way you have, but I really like the fact that people can then do that extra piece, which is take data from multiple portals and put them in their own project page. That's where I see a huge amount of value for scientists and learning environments. So I work in a university, so teaching students, and as well as we work with Indigenous and community-based people. So giving them that space to have them collect all of the different data portals. So showing the value of having multiple repositories, as well as being able for people to put that in one place. And that's why I asked about the visualization, even if it's a static image. So a researcher creates, one of the things is sometimes researchers are worried about how their data is going to be presented. So a researcher creates, say, an infographic, which is what we work with them on, to say this is a summary of our data and what it means. And if that could then be presented on the page, the power of the visualization, it speaks to people a lot more than also having the data. So yeah, I really like what you've done. So thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a good idea. I like a good infographic.
Awesome. I'm trying to read more questions. How you fit into the data ecosystem? Yeah, thanks. This is from Kerry. Thanks for your consideration of how you fit into the data ecosystem. Yeah, it's a problem everyone shares, and that's absolutely true. The ecosystem being technology, people, processes, tools, all sorts. Yeah, it's
there's a tendency for it to become siloed, I think, which is pretty common knowledge, I think, in all research organizations as well as government. Yeah, everyone beavers away on their corner of the problem.
Well, one thing I would reflect back on is if people remember the Make Australian Government Data Accessible project from the Turnbull government here in Australia. Sorry for those who are outside Australia. So they put investment into Data 61 project Magda, and that became the facade for Data.gov.au. I remember when the UX process was run for that discovery for what might be making Australian government data more accessible. Project concepts did get raised. So the idea that people could come together as a cohort, define for themselves a project, collect data sets, and then provide feedback within the context of that project. which I never saw sort of emerge as a feature, but it's not an uncommon value add. And like I kind of mentioned earlier, that as soon as you've got people churning the butter, as soon as you've got people like creating energy and turning this into good outcomes, they do feel like they want to funnel that and make it repeatable for others. So Lee's comment about templates, I've seen that in organizations that have kind of expert champions. There might be 15 people in a big organization, and there's like 150 that effectively follow the champions.
Yeah.
And then there's like 1,500 that are basically just, you know, they'll just go with the flow. But essentially, without those 15 being able to be discoverable, referenceable, and kind of, you know, available in some sense, you know, the 150 can't be good, you know, attentive followers. So cultural practice really relies on visibility of the cultural leaders or the practice leaders, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely something we're considering in sort of next phase of promotion. Yeah.
Well, here you are, top of the pyramid, cultural leader, making change. It's awesome. Well, thanks, Tom. I will jump to some other updates, but any other questions first, because my updates are much less important. Anyone wants to jump in with a question? Lee would like a quick link. Okay. Yeah, so Tom's portal might not be out in the public at the moment. Is there a public link at the moment, Tom? I think it's internal, right?
So it's internal at the moment. You did provide a quote for generating a public facing version, but we haven't got the funding for that yet.
Well, we're going to have this video, Lee, so you can reference the video. It'll be up. It's video next week, so it'll be a reference for folks. Okay, well, I'll go on to a couple of updates. I wrote something down somewhere, but I will bring it up on my side and know what I'm doing. Yeah, so just going to throw out a couple of updates. I mentioned the CCAN Demo Days event next week. So Link is going to move forward its public forum. From today, if you want to go onto our website, go to the public forum page, you can just register. Tom's probably going to be there. Who knows? Folks will be there. He will have his video up, obviously, by then. We've got a cool video of a Drupal sync for CCAN that's on Drupal.org. It's been published by Sergey Shadrin from our team. And he's done a walkthrough. A bit nervous, but he's very confident in what he was talking about. And it's great. It's exactly what you want to see from someone who's just put a module up, how to configure, how to use it, how, you know, the things you might do with it in the future. And it's all there. We also have a video from the CCAN Monthly Live last week or the week before, where Brett and I were sort of presenting. I was talking about this CCAN Demo Days idea, but Brett did a demo on code spaces, so spinning up CCAN on GitHub code spaces, which for anyone who might want to play with a version of CCAN, like from a different branch on GitHub, you can use code spaces to spin that up. You don't need to like get infrastructure or anything like that. It's just for temporary use, kind of, you know, working with just getting an idea of how the latest patch release or versions of CCAN will be operating. That video might not be up. I can't promise when that video is up, the CCAN Monthly Live, but we might end up doing a different one, just a short little one from Brett, and that would be up next week. And I know Karina, because Karina, who joined us as my EA ages ago, now she's doing much more important stuff. But she still works on something that was tasked to her many, many years ago, which is updating the datashades.info. Basically just going through each of the portals, identifying which one needs to be updated on a monthly basis, executing the update. So she's done a little demo on what she's been doing there. She is the value driver of datashades.info on a day-to-day basis. And we might be updating datashades.info in the future with some cool features. So it's worth having a look at what it does today. Yaroslav. So in our team, Yaroslav is running in the Canberra Marathon. He's doing the half marathon. We got some really cool story out in the wild on Right Act, which is a local Canberra portal. The links for this, I should drop in. I can imagine Kate's probably doing in the background. She is too, champion. So the links to that article, go check it out. Learn a little bit about Yaroslav's story of coming to Canberra. It's an amazing story, and it's just one of the amazing stories. We might publish a couple of others or help to get a couple of other stories from folks in our Ukraine team out into the public domain as well. But you can donate, drop a donation in, show Yaroslav that you support his efforts of staying fit whilst also being a product owner and staying long hours in front of the keyboard. And let me see, events. So CCAN Monthly Live, if you want to talk at CCAN Monthly Live, go to ccan.org events, and you can see the info there about how to express your interest. You'll also see the past ones, so you get a sense of what people have been talking about. On YouTube, you'll find the CCAN Monthly Live videos. They kind of haven't been published on CCAN Monthly Live in the YouTube account for a little while, but I'm going to check in on that and see if I can help Yelena, who normally puts them up. And there's a really important one, the playlist for Sergey. So Sergey Motnyuk has been doing his Tuesday tutorials. Well, he did the tutorials a while back. Kate's been publishing them. Andrew and our team has written a blog post recently. The thing of note around the blog post is it actually outlines how to use the Google Chrome extension to translate from Russian language to whatever transcripted translation you'd like, such as English, for those with English as their first language. And those videos are really good. Like, I don't know, I'm a bit proud of Sergey. He's another one of the champs. He's been Kharkiv the whole time through the the last couple of years, and he's still producing great content like this. He's still committed to supporting liberal democracies by effectively being part of the backbone of the CCAN project, which is all about transparency and accountability for our government, public data, not just there, but across different domains as well. Research sector, as Claire and others here were covering as well. Boy, I think I'm close to the end. I think that is all of my updates except for one. Absolutely Open Data Day. So next week from the 2nd to 8th of March. I'm keen to get videos from folks, essentially. I'm keen to try and put a showcase together around how CCAN is being used. And I mentioned at the start, I just have to cap off at the end. I have some ability to control and push and scream and yell for folks who work at Link Digital to put cool stuff together. But I don't have that kind of formal control to kind of push too hard with the outside. So if you have contacts and you would like to put a video together yourself, perhaps just anything related to CCAN, it could be a front-end experience, it could be your appreciation of an aspect of CCAN. Yeah, put it together. If you want me to publish it on Link's YouTube channel, I can. We'll put our Link ones there. But ideally, anything that you put together, we'll create a playlist on the CCAN YouTube channel as well. And that'll be like more of a global CCAN demo days. This is kind of an idea I just kind of jumped into a couple of weekends back. This year, I'm hoping there's enough of an impact to get something together, and it'll all be about springing off and having a really bigger impact next year around the same sort of opportunity, same sort of process. But yeah, there's lots of cool stuff to talk about, lots of stories behind CCAN at the moment. And preferred length, Lee, good question. Anywhere between 30 seconds and 3 hours. So it really doesn't matter. It can be a little vox pop. It can be just a discussion with someone covering topics that you find interesting and what you might hope and wish and desire for CCAN to be able to fill as a gap in the ecosystem that we talked about. Anything. Yeah. Anything from a short radio blurb, yes, to a Rogan episode. Absolutely. But yeah, and Karina and I did one, I think it went for about 8 minutes. We just talked about data shades info. Sergey Shadrin's one, I think, goes for about 14 minutes, just going through the CCAN sync demo. The Code Spaces one that Brett ran at the CCAN Monthly Live, I think that goes for like 5 minutes. And yeah, as usual, product owners here at Link should be the ones that might be put forward to make some videos, but I'm super keen to get some devs as well and some non-traditionally demoing people, demoing the things that they enjoy and the things that they work with. So it could be quite a bit of code related walkthroughs. So Sergey Shadrin's is certainly in the back end of Drupal and showing you how to configure it and everything. So that's a cool one. Yeah, right on time. 11:57.
Right.
Kate.
Cool. Right. Thank you, Stephen. Those are actually good insights and updates. And we also want to express our gratitude to Tom. This has been really great. Yeah. For our attendees who are actually also keen on understanding how Data4me works. Your explanations, Tom, are all easy to understand by tech or non-tech individuals like me. So yeah, great questions and feedback we received to today's session, where we can get updates on this project. So that's the last question that we've got. We'll let you know.
So email me.
Yeah.
Because it's not public facing at the moment,
Yeah.
it's just internal. Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Tom. And also to our attendees, we really appreciate your time, your time sharing with us today. Your feedback is very important. So that's why once you leave the forum today, there's a survey that will prompt on your screen. Right. We truly appreciate everyone's time here. Have a great day.
Thank you,
Thank
Kate,
you.
as always.
Thanks, everyone.
And thanks, Tom.
everyone.
Amazing.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao, ciao. Bye.
Bye.